Did you know that most children already have anxiety by the age of 10? At 10 years old, they are already anxious because of things like mental health issues driven by family background, but also because of society and the pressures that their parents are putting on them to achieve certain goals in a very short period of time. Today, we talk about this with my guest, Jessica, and she will tell us about different things that we can do to help bring our children back to reality, create a safe mental space for them so that they can grow and explore and feel confident in who they are. Thank you for joining us. I look forward to the show. I don't know if I can take it anymore.
When you are depressed, you don't want to get
It
out of
seems
it.
so hard today.
You don't want to be bothered with anyone.
I don't have any
But
motivation.
overcoming depression is going to require that you get up and engage with life again.
All I want to do is sleep.
When you are feeling down, the worst thing you can do
The last thing
is
I want to do is
isolate
hang out
yourself.
with my friends.
Because isolation actually intensifies sadness.
I don't think this will ever
So
go
I
away.
recommend finding a distraction that will shift your energy.
I need somebody to help me. Thank you for joining me on the Mental Health Podcast. This is your host, Barbie Moreno, and I am here today with Jessica Watterud, a licensed professional clinical counselor who oftentimes specializes in children, their developmental issues, I would say. Would you say that that's about accurate?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then anything
Trauma.
else with that trauma, and then also how the body, if you have stress in your physical body, how that also affects you emotionally and your mental health as well.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Perfect. So we were talking before we started, and I was telling you that one of my passions is children. I think that they're under a ridiculous amount of stress at this point in the age of where we are, and everybody's got their kid going to medical school by the time they're out of the womb. So what started you into working with children?
So I actually never really thought I was going to work with children. And then when I got into my internship, I worked under a play therapist. And I just was so interested in how you can use play to help kids work through normal stressors, larger than normal stressors, and even trauma. So then I got involved in the early risers program in the public school system. And that was really, working with kids that maybe aren't at the level of having a diagnosis, but still having some things that they're struggling. Obviously, they've been identified in the school, but they've got some maybe higher emotional needs. And then worked with a program called Incredible Years through the agency. And that was more targeting the whole system. So we worked with the school, we worked with the kids in a group setting. And then we also worked with the parents in a group setting on like, how do you help your kids get to the developmental level that they need to be,
Yeah.
and being more proactive about how to support our kids.
So in general, like I'm in California. Where are you at?
North Dakota.
Okay. So in California, I feel like we're thought to be relatively, I would say, interested in those things, and we try to be proactive. But I have a 9-year-old and I have a 15-year-old, and both in the public school system in a very nice area. So, you would think that the schools are amazing and stuff, but it still seems like, even though they have like May is mental health awareness, it's like it's a month, it's not like an everyday thing. And
Right.
You have worked with the public school system. Can you tell me what your opinion is on how we would maybe get that to be an everyday thing? Or, have you solved this problem?
I wish I had. I've worked in a few different schools, and it is so different. It's amazing the difference that experiences I've had in different schools.
Okay.
So it really comes from the top down. If you have administration that is supportive and wants to do as much as we can, and then there's different approaches. Are we proactive and we're trying to catch these kids really young and get these families involved, or are we being reactive to, like, now we're having issues in the classroom that are impacting, the teachers and the other students, and we're going to try to, put out that fire.
And I feel like a lot of times the kids that have issues, they do seem to be like getting help. But I just almost feel like just the everyday child isn't getting help, right? Like I feel like we're putting attention into the kids who quote unquote have issues, but if a child goes to school and they don't show that they're having emotional issues, we don't pay attention to that, but they might be going through something, or just being a child sometimes can be hard. We don't know what's going on at home. We don't know if there's somebody who drinks at home. We don't know if they're well taken care of or not. We don't know even if somebody simply yells at them, how that affects them. And I don't feel like there's education around that for both the parents, the teachers, and the children.
Absolutely. I actually, interesting that you brought that up, because I actually just had this happen with my son.
Wow.
So he did not show it to anybody other than some people who would know him, and we're a pretty small school system, but somebody had recognized that like he was shaking and asked him what was going on. And he said his throat hurt and he needed to go home. And she said, I know that feeling, because he was trying not to cry. So his throat hurt because he was trying to hold that back. And she recognized it for what it was. It was anxiety. It wasn't that he was actually sick. So then she was able to do something with it and help him with it.
Right.
Thankfully, honestly, like her own experience and having that anxiety, she knew what it was, but that wasn't something that was taught to her.
Right.
So if we could get more education on like, what are these things? What are the signs to look for? Then we could really help these kids. So he ended up getting some support in the school, and then he was able to finish the school day and he was fine. Where if that would have been a phone call to me, he's sick, come pick him up, he would have missed half a day of school because of it. And it was anxiety.
Right. And so if you hear from the nurse, like he has a sore throat, you're thinking he has a cold.
Right.
Right. So you're like, you can give him, put him in bed and give him cold medicine. And it's not even it doesn't have anything to do with what was really going on.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. And really in children, that's typically the way that it shows up, is more physical. So they have stomach aches, they have sore throats, they have headaches, because we all have a physical sensation that goes with our emotions. Just as adults, we've stopped paying attention to it as much. So kids, it's still pretty prominent in them. They will complain about things. My kids are probably so sick of, are you nervous about something?
They're like, stop analyzing me.
But a lot of times that's what's going on.
Yeah.
So that when kids are saying, I have, my throat hurts or my stomach hurts, or really like just having a short conversation. It doesn't have to be this big, therapy session, but what's going on and what does it feel like? And is there anything bothering you? Those can be pretty quick ways to get to it.
This is a big question, and it's a lot to ask you out of the blue, but is there anything that you can think of? Because you got to go to the school, so somebody knew how to get into the schools, right? And again, you did say that they're smaller and stuff, but is there anything that you can think of that we can start doing on like a national level, or even just if somebody like me as a mom who thinks this is important and, wrote a mindfulness book for kids and goes and talks to them at the school, how do I get people to pay attention?
So when I was in the school, it was a very incredible forward-thinking administrator that had a lot of meetings with the agency I was working with, and what are some things we can do? How do we be proactive about this? And I don't even really know how long those conversations, if it was years, if it was months, and then it just seems like when we're working with bigger systems, the process is very slow, and I like right now. So as a parent, I call about everything. I'm like, here's what's going on. This is the experience my kid had. This is what other kids are saying. And as a provider in a small community, I can say, I know that this isn't just my children.
Right.
This isn't that they're being overly sensitive, which can be the way that some people view it. But and our school system that my kids are in has been really great about, okay, I can see that, like, let's work together to figure out the problem. And this is me coming in as a parent, but I'm also a professional. Now, as far as like, how do we change things system wide? I mean, ideally, I think it would be great to have every school has a counselor on staff, a mental health counselor. We have our school counselors, right? And they have training in some of these things, but it is a different area than a community mental health counselor.
Yeah. And I would imagine that there needs to be some additional training for the entire staff, right? Even, I
Yeah,
mean, everybody who has to interact with children, whether it's a PE teacher, a regular teacher, somebody who's in the cafeteria, somebody in the office, everybody should at least have some sort of training as to, what to look for, right?
absolutely.
Because
Yeah.
I feel like kids are better hiding it than I think that you can see it if you know what you're looking for,
Yeah.
but they're better at hiding things than even we are, because there's that stuff that comes from the parents. Like, you don't give our information out to other people. You keep this a secret at home, and then they're taking all of that, building it up, and they're becoming a split personality at 5.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and I mean, I'm guilty of this. I'm a counselor, and I'm guilty of, telling my kids, stop crying, this
Yeah.
is a big deal. And it is a big deal to them. Um, and I was thinking of something while you were talking there, and then I lost it.
I hate it when that happens.
It'll probably come back to me in the
Right.
middle of nowhere, but
Yeah. I would just say something like, I don't know. And so in your community, I don't know how it is, right? I've never been to North Dakota. I have no idea. Obviously, Californians think everybody else is behind the bar on everything. That's just our mentality, right? We're just like, ooh, we think we're the best. But is mental health something that people talk about in your community?
no. So it's a small community where I am, but North Dakota in general is just it would be fair to say mental
Yeah.
health is behind in North Dakota. So when I was working in the school system, it was actually in Minnesota.
Hmm.
Minnesota is a little further ahead as far as early intervention for mental health.
Okay.
So there is there's a lack of providers across the country for mental health, but when we're talking North Dakota, and especially rural North Dakota where I am, there is just not even close to the amount to meet the need.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, like, I go back to, I know you have the supplements, and we're going to talk about the physical body, but then I also think about the school lunches
Yeah.
and how that is affecting them, right? Because our school lunch system is, at least here where we are, is atrocious. They don't even make the meals anymore. They basically have like a bus that comes and delivers them, or a van that comes and delivers them. We don't even have a cafeteria anymore. And that's the way our school district is just set up.
Mhm.
And the things that they put in there are, not hot dogs, chicken nuggets, hamburgers. And it's not stuff that we would even give them at home, yet they're eating it at school. And then it's like, how are you expected to function when
Mhm.
your physical body is not getting the nutrition that it needs? It messes with your mental health. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, prior to adding in functional medicine and supplements to my practice, that was the main things that I talked to people about when they first came in was, what is your sleep like? What's
Mhm.
your nutrition like? Are you getting any exercise? Just some of this basic, how do you take care of your body?
Right.
And I asked teenagers, typically, I mean, we're seeing kids younger and younger, but like, how much time are you spending on your phone? How
Mhm.
many hours a day? And then I did not expect the number of hours that they say. I'm
Oh,
like,
all
how
the
do you
time.
even do that? That is your entire day. I mean,
Mhm.
with going to school and then your phone, you have no other time.
Mhm.
So we talk about how all of those impact kids. And I mean, I've had plenty of, these are typically older, like high school students, where like, I don't eat the school lunch because I feel worse afterwards, but then they're not getting
Exactly.
any
Right.
food, which
Right.
also isn't good.
Right. Yeah, it's hard. We used to make our kids every morning get a breakfast at home, like that. That's our thing. We used to make them like eggs and stuff for breakfast, but we actually started doing a smoothie, because I could dump so much more in the smoothie and hide it, with all the different supplements and all of these different things, and the vegetables they have no idea that are in there. Um, to hope that they like last them throughout the day, right? The protein that we put in there, and it's not cheap. And so that's the other thing, is that, whenever you get into functional health, because um, we have quite a few of those people here in Orange County, but I can tell you that if I didn't have the insurance that I have and all of that, it's not a cheap thing to do.
No, I mean, unfortunately, our systems are designed to keep us sick. It's
Yeah.
just not, it's not really about proactive health. And I mean, as I've been digging into this more, just the connection between our physical health and our mental health, we need B vitamins to create the neurotransmitters to help us feel happy.
Yeah.
So if we don't have those, how, the connection between what our nutrition is lacking and then the rates of anxiety and depression is incredible.
And then they're put on we are all put on medication that are antidepressants, anti-anxiety things, which I'm okay with medication if it's needed and stuff. But if I could take a B vitamin and be better,
Right.
and not have to be on some, depression medication, that would be so much better. And we don't want to put kids on that stuff. Can you talk to me about actually ADHD? Like, what is that, right? We always hear it. And then is it
Okay.
actually correctly diagnosed, or are we just giving that title to kids?
I feel like I could talk to you about this for like 4 hours.
Good. Well, you have like 40 minutes, so go.
Um, so ADHD, not my favorite diagnosis. It is real. There are people who have ADHD, and unfortunately what has happened is that we've kind of taken any symptom that looks like ADHD and it's therefore ADHD. But so much of what I'm seeing is it's trauma, it's chronic stress. We have poor sleep habits, poor nutrition. And if we were to work with those things, there would not be ADHD symptoms. But once you start giving those medications, you're messing with the system even more. And now we have impacts on the brain.
Permanent impacts, especially
Permanent
because they're
impacts.
so young.
Yeah. Yeah. So every time I have kids that come in and I'm told they're diagnosed with ADHD at 5, I'm just, like internally I cringe. It's so hard. Because I don't really know a 5-year-old that wouldn't have symptoms of ADHD. I mean, my son is 6 and
Yeah.
he can't sit still.
Right. And they're full, that's what they are. They're just full of energy. What do we want
Yeah.
them to be? Like, that is what they are.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's a good thing. And this
Yes.
is why we have recess and outdoor time. And so, and I recognize that there are cases that are more extreme, but
Sure.
our school system really isn't set up for the developmental needs of young children. That coming in and sitting in a desk is not ideal for really any young children.
No, even teenagers.
Right. Yeah.
Even teenagers, just when I talk to my daughter who's in high school, she talks about how boring it is, and like they just have to sit there and that's just like their day. And then when there's like stuff that's interactive, like cooking class or something, then she's excited and she talks about that because they're doing stuff versus just sitting there and being talked to.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be so interesting to see, and I'm sure there's studies on this that I'm not aware of, if the rates of ADHD in cultures where there's not that traditional, sit down in the classroom,
right,
and it's more hands-on interactive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of my dreams is to start a school that is exactly that. Right. So it's the kids have the opportunity that there's different areas that they can go to as they want to go to them. And if you're like learning how to count, you learn how to count with like maybe counting seeds versus like sitting on a paper and counting dots, but just like, because that's how they learn. That's how their brain learns.
Yeah.
Talk to me about like when we start giving our kids these the medication and we're not providing for them nutritionally, how does that affect them later in life?
So anytime we're doing, I mean, it could even be, I hear a lot about like melatonin, and melatonin is natural and the body produces it. But when we're giving the body something artificially, the body starts to rely on that. So even if it was, I'm 5 and I just have trouble sitting still, maybe I'm a little bit more of an active 5-year-old.
Right.
And then I'm given medication. Well, now I'm reliant on that to be able to focus because I didn't let my brain develop the way that it was supposed to develop.
Right.
So, there are higher rates of addiction when kids are given medication for ADHD younger.
Yeah, I would imagine at that point, then they're probably going to be the people who have to take sleep medicine every night.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
because
then
they haven't learned. Yeah.
And then sleep medicine only works for so long.
Yeah. And becomes addictive.
Yep. So then I have 50-year-olds that sleep medication does not work, but their brain also does not know how to turn off. So they're on, 7 different meds to try to balance everything.
Yeah. And that is just, again, if you just start with the little ones, right? Yeah. It's heartbreaking because it's like you're doing an amazing job in your community. And there's so many other communities that need somebody like you who understands that, yes, medications can be used, but let's look at physically, what are we doing with them and how that associates to their body. And also that, and again, it goes back to kind of what I feel is that we don't only ever need to look at the kid that's showing the most symptoms. We need to take every kid into consideration and, make sure that they know how to express when I'm anxious, when I'm sad. Knowing just when they're anxious and sad is a whole nother thing, right?
Yes,
Like you were saying, your son
absolutely.
had like a sore throat and, it came to be that he had anxiety, but if he could just know like, oh, when I get a sore throat, it means I might have anxiety, like just knowing these things.
Yeah. Building a child's emotional vocabulary can
Yes.
turn things around hugely. If they can just put a word to it. There's a phrase that we use in EMDR called name it to tame it.
Uh-huh.
So, and this is a very real experience. So, for any of your listeners, if you have a really high level of emotion, say it out loud and it will come down.
Oh,
Not
wow.
all the way, you won't be calm completely, but it will reduce just by saying it out loud.
So if you say like, I feel scared, it
Yes.
will, because you're acknowledging it. You're not trying to push against it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like to talk to people about like, think about standing in the ocean, which you're in California. So this would,
Yeah.
If you are standing in the ocean and a big wave comes and you like plant and you're going to stand there, you're going to get knocked over.
Right.
But if you're standing there and you're kind of like just letting yourself float with the wave, you're going to just go with it. And then you're going to come back down again.
Yeah.
It's the same with our emotions. If I'm going to fight it, it's going to be such a strong force and I'm going to feel it. Like I'm going to get a sore throat or muscle aches, or it can even cause, bigger problems. There's, a book that I'm in the middle of right now about the stress disease connection, and that there's a connection between our emotions and fighting those and getting cancer and autoimmune disease and that this long-term impact of denying ourselves that feeling.
Right. And then what happens is that, so then you get cancer and they treat it with more toxic stuff, chemo and radiation and stuff like that. And it's like, if we could just identify all of these things, we wouldn't be in this space where then we're putting more toxic stuff in our body, to try to heal from the cancer that's actually just trying to protect our body by forming. It's like this whole thing, this whole big cycle that just seems to, it needs attention. That's the kind of the point of this podcast. Talk to me about EDMR. I know what it is, but I think most people probably do not. So can you tell us what it is, how you use it with kids, and just, what its benefit is?
Yeah. So, EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy. It's kind of a tongue twister there, but really what you're looking at is, what am I believing about myself? So we all hold negative beliefs about ourselves, and many of them were entered our lives when we were very, very young, like before 5. Now that doesn't mean that people don't have negative beliefs that entered later, especially if there's been a traumatic event that shook their world. But a lot of them came in before they were 5. And then we carry that with us. So if my negative belief is that I am not good enough, then I'm going to see things that happen in my life and I'm going to interpret those a certain way. So if somebody doesn't say hi to me, then that means something about me rather than, maybe they didn't see me, or maybe they're having a bad day. But if I believe like, oh, they didn't say hi because they're mad at me, now I'm stressed out about that. So it changes the way that we interact with the world. And it impacts our relationships. It impacts our performance at school or work. And so what we do is we go back and we look at that core memory as far back as a person can remember, or maybe it's a feeling and they don't really know what it's connected to, but they can feel it in their body. And we reprocess that. So that we can do this through eye movements. We can do it through, I have like these little buzzies that kind of feel like a cell phone vibrating, and just go back to that memory and work on seeing it through a different lens. So, maybe it wasn't that I wasn't good enough. Maybe it was that, my parents were really busy and we were poor and they had to work a lot. And it wasn't that they didn't want to be there for me, but they weren't able to do that because of the other stressors in life, and then what that does is kind of flows down and changes the way that we see things going forward.
Right. It changes your perspective.
Yes.
And absolutely. It doesn't become self-detrimental anymore.
Yeah. Yep.
I feel like people could do that for the rest of their life because we all have so many issues, right?
Yes. Yeah. I always tell people, when you come to therapy, this is not like you're done with therapy and you're good forever.
Yeah. It's
I
a
have
life
plenty of
process.
people that we do some really heavy work, and then they'll take a break, and then maybe they come back and touch base every now and then, and we do a little bit of work. So we all need to do work throughout our entire lives. And maybe that doesn't always mean coming to therapy, but hopefully we're working on ourselves.
Yeah. Self-growth, self-understanding. So do you do EMD? It's EMDR, right?
Yep.
EMDR with children?
Yeah, I do. And I actually pretty recently started using sand tray. So I use this with adults too, but it's really great for children. So they don't actually have to put any words to it. They can show me with figures in the sand. So if we're working through a specific event, then they can show me the scene in the sand with the figures that we have. And they don't even have to tell me what that scene means. Maybe they don't even know what it means, because there's parts of our brain that will be involved in this that we aren't consciously aware of. So they can do a lot of work without even really knowing that they're doing the work.
So when they're playing, they are then like almost reliving it and getting it out, or what does the play do?
Yeah, in a way, but there's distance. So when we're using the sand, it's there's a few different ways that we can do this, that they can show me, I'm in the sand. This is me. This is my scene. This is my experience. Or it can be, this is just figures in the sand. I'm not in there. They always are. But they can give themselves that distance. So it's not so emotionally intense. And with kids, it's much slower. Because they don't have that level of tolerance. And I mean, there's plenty of adults that don't either. So we go a lot slower, but with kids, it takes a lot longer to get to those deep things.
So when they're playing, and then are they talking and telling you what each character is doing and what it means? Is that what they're doing?
Sometimes.
Therapy?
Yeah, sometimes they are. But I actually don't have a lot of kids that do that. A lot of them just kind of move stuff around in the sand. And what I'm doing while they're doing that is actually brushing. So I have little makeup brushes and I brush their hands. And nice. That helps their brain process through it. It's a dual attention. So they're kind of focused on this brushing, but also on what's happening. It helps them stay present and not get overwhelmed with the emotion.
Then I would imagine that because a lot of kids now sit on iPads, they don't get that playtime that they could be doing this, right? Like they are playing with their own toys and reliving and reacting, because that's where their imagination comes from, right?
Yep.
And so maybe that would be a reason why I feel like, especially the kids after COVID, really kind of changed the way things were, I just feel like they don't know how to socialize as well. They don't know how to share as well, and they don't process their emotions as well. And it really, for me, like being a parent, I really saw a big change after COVID, and we're very conscious about watching the behaviors and the amount of iPad and stuff like that. But, when we were a house where you did not get an iPad after COVID, you had no choice because the schools made you have one.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And that was your social interaction.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's how school was taught for us, so if I'm a parent and I'm listening to this and I have a kid who's at an age where they still will play, is it your advice to say, like, have them play as much as possible on not some sort of a device, including not watching TV and a cartoon and all that stuff, so that they can reenact these things on their own?
Absolutely. And kids will naturally do this, prior to having iPads and phones and devices. This was how kids process their lives. It didn't have to be traumatic or stressful. It's just your life. If you can remember back to when you were little and, playing house or playing school, this is processing your world. We're trying to make sense of our world and make it fit. So it's just a really natural way to do this. And that's what I love about EMDR. It's the natural process the brain goes through anyway. We're just using it and giving it a little bit of a nudge so that it can move a little faster.
And do you do tapping as well?
Yeah.
Can you explain what that is to people?
Yeah, there's tapping is a term that's used in two different areas. So there's EFT tapping, which is a little bit different, but I use tapping as so we're strengthening neural pathways. So I I explain this to people as like when you learn how to ride a bike. When you learn how to ride a bike, you're using both sides of your body. Your feet are moving, your hands are steering, you're balancing. There's a lot of things going on, and you're doing it in repetition. You don't forget how to ride a bike. When you get back on a bike, if you haven't ridden for 10 years, it's a little wobbly, but you can do it.
Right.
So this is what we're trying to create. But we're using positive experiences. So if I have, somebody gave me a compliment today and that felt good, then I want to notice that. If I can, if I'm in touch with it, find it in my body and then tap that in. So using both sides of my body, there's a lot of different ways to do that. I'll just, so I can show you, you could just go and tap while I'm focusing on that sensation, or just like, I feel happy when somebody gives me a compliment, if I can't find it in my body yet. Because as humans, we're very good at focusing on negative. We replay the negative things over and over in our head. So we're already creating those connections. We don't need to worry about that. We want to shift it to, I'm going to create those positive connections. So then when I am having a stressful moment, when things are hard, I can access that because that connection is already there. So
how would you access it?
It could be as simple as thinking about it.
Okay.
So I can think about this memory and I can get back to it because that connection is strong in my brain. Okay. For little kids, we do things like we will make a connection with maybe a finger. Mm-hmm. So I have this positive experience. I'm going to hold this finger and we're going to use bilateral stimulation, that tapping, to make that connection with this finger. So then when I need to pull it up, I can go like this and grab my finger and I can feel it again. Or it could be a figure that we have. Kids do this with their blankies.
Right. Or their stuffies. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So we already do some of these things. We're just using it more intentionally.
It's interesting because I think that we are so smart intuitively, like what you said, like the kids use these things. They have no idea why they're attached to a certain blanket or a stuffy or whatever. And by the way, for people who don't have young children, stuffies are now their stuffed animals. When my son said he needed his stuffy, I'm like, what the heck is a stuffy? Yeah, I mean, they're doing it. And we didn't teach them to do it. They're just naturally doing that. That's very interesting. So what am I looking for if I see, I mean, I know every kid shows things differently, but I have, a young boy and he's playing in the neighborhood with other kids. And I want to make sure that, the kids are healthy and that they're okay. And obviously we can't step into people's lives and fix them. But what am I looking for in a kid that might be a warning behavior that, maybe I should speak to them in a different way. Maybe I don't want my kid playing with them, unfortunately. I mean, we do have to put those boundaries down. But can you just give me like some things where you're like, ooh, that might be something that I need to think about?
Mm-hmm. So I think, if you have an idea of where kids should typically be at that stage in life emotionally. So, we're all pretty aware that, 2 and 3-year-olds have tantrums and they can't handle a lot of emotions. So if we're getting to like, okay, this kid is 10 and when things don't go their way, they're throwing a tantrum. There's something going on there. There's something that's not, and not that 10-year-olds don't get upset, but they really shouldn't be, throwing things and throwing their body on the floor and looking as if they're 2. So if we think about, are they at the emotional stage that makes sense for their age, or is this further back? Are they regressing? And it can be kids that like most of the time they're at the right stage, but something gets triggered and they flip backwards. That's when we're like, something is going on with them there. Something was, it's connected to a memory, or they've got a stressor going on in their life that's connected to that.
I feel like that happens to me.
Oh yeah.
I can be completely fine, right? And then something happens and I'm like, what the heck? Da, 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 and I am completely out of my normal personality, right? And it's triggered to something. Somewhere, somehow you're like, my mom disrespected me when I was doing that, and now it's going to trigger me when I do it now.
Right. Yeah. So, and it can get tricky because, I probably oversee things at this point and overanalyze, but how people react to normal emotions is a really good clue. Everybody has anxiety. Everybody gets angry. Everybody, we all have the same feelings. We experience them different. But then what we do with them is really important.
I love that you said everybody has anxiety, everybody gets angry, because I feel like we are taught that if you have any of these things, there's something wrong with you.
Mhm.
And it's natural for us to, I mean, our body is built this way, right?
Yep.
What's the purpose of anxiety?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that. If we didn't have anxiety, we would never get anything done. Anxiety actually helps us in a lot of ways. If I didn't have anxiety about a test, I wouldn't study for the test. I
Right.
just go in like, oh, this doesn't really matter.
Mhm.
If I didn't have anxiety about, if I say this thing to this person, they're going to get upset with me. I wouldn't try to figure out how to say it in a way that they're going to actually hear me.
Mhm.
So anxiety really serves a purpose, and it can get out of control just like any other emotion.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I like that. I mean, I don't think anybody has said that. And all of the podcasts that I've done and all of the conversations that I've had, we just hear that you're supposed to recognize your emotions and, but anything that's like a negative emotion is means there's something wrong with you, and you probably need to talk to somebody, and you probably need anxiety medication. And is that why it seems like a lot of very high functioning people have like that kind of like anxious personality, right? Because they're always doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then actually, what ends up happening for a lot of those people is that rest and being calm is very uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we can get addicted to the anxiety.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Interesting. How do I talk to a teenager so they hear me?
Mm.
You're like, when you know that, let me know.
I mean, teenagers, and just like all of us, we want to be heard, right? So, um, I I just had this conversation this week that I don't feel like anybody hears me. They just think I'm a kid and I don't have anything to say and I don't know what I'm talking about, but I do.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm guilty of this, and with my kids too, that I don't always listen. I don't hear their side. So it's really taking that time to just listen and not make any judgments about it, not feel like you have to jump in right away, but just hear them out and ask questions, ask clarifying questions so you can really get to, how are you viewing this? How are you viewing the world? And then maybe, as they feel like, okay, you're trying to really understand this, then they'll start to take some feedback. Any of the teenagers that I work with, I take a while before I give them feedback. I'm like, I just want to hear what it's like for you. And I'm going to validate it. Like, yeah, that has got to get really frustrating that people are always telling you what to do.
So
You
validate
don't-
them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because really they don't get, I mean, teenagers are in this tough spot where they're working on becoming adults, but they're not. And they want that independence, which is good. Developmentally, we want them to be at that place, but they still have a lot of restrictions on them. So,
Right. Yeah. It reminds me of yesterday, actually. So my daughter's in water polo and she had the ball and she didn't throw it. And I didn't say it in the nicest way. I'm not a competitive mom, but I was like, when you have the ball, you don't like to throw it or what? And she was like so taken aback by my comment. And I was like, well, I never ever say anything about your performance ever, except for give you kudos. But like, that was like the one time, like she literally had the ball and like could have thrown it.
yeah.
And she was just really hurt. And I was offended that she was offended, right? And then I asked her later, like a few minutes later, and I was like, why are you so upset? I said, all I did was kind of try to give you some feedback on the fact that you're never going to make the goal if you don't try to shoot it. So you might as well at least try, because not shooting it means you're for sure not going to make it. But if you shoot it, you have a chance, even if you don't think you do, right? And then she's like, yeah, but that's not the way you said it. She's like, the way you said it is, why are you not throwing the ball basically when you have a ball? And at first I was like, that's exactly what I meant in my mind. And then I thought about it for like a good minute. And I said, I am sorry for the way that I said that. And I am sorry for the way that it hurt you. And then she was perfectly fine.
Mm-hmm.
But my normal reaction is to be like, well, suck it up, buttercup. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah. I mean, actually sitting there with it and I wanted to be like, you're fine, suck it up. But to hear her say that it bothered her. It didn't matter if I felt like the comment. And then once I heard myself re-say it, I thought I was being a jackass, but but to actually sit with it, I thought that probably meant a lot, right?
Yeah. And I love that you apologize, because I think this is so missed. As parents, like I remember somebody telling me, like, you really want to be careful about when you apologize, because you don't want to make it about what you did wrong. You want them to realize that they did something wrong. And
That's
I
horrible.
completely disagree with that. I
Yeah,
want
that's
to
horrible
disagree with
advice.
that, because I want to teach my kids that I mess up and I make mistakes, and it's okay.
Yeah,
And you can apologize and we can work it out. And I don't have it all together either.
right. Right. I'm
So
human too. Yeah.
yes. Yeah. Because then it's, first of all, apologizing doesn't become this huge, like, I have to swallow my pride and it's so difficult thing for them. But they also know that they can come and talk to me about something that I'm doing that bothers them, because I will listen and then I'll apologize if necessary.
Yes. Yeah. And that their feelings matter and that they've been heard, like you were saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that, like you were saying too, is basically all we all want.
Right.
So as adults and little children and teenagers, we
Mm-hmm.
just want to feel like somebody has heard us.
Yep. We want to be seen and we want to be heard.
Yeah.
Basically.
Tell me about your I don't know if you want to call them supplements or how you want to talk about the physical body and how it connects to the physical mind, like the brain. And then I would like to talk about how it affects to the emotional mind.
Okay. So I think I talked about this, that I would start with like sleep and nutrition, right? And exercise, screen, stuff like that. So we know it's pretty well known. A lot of people know, if you're not getting enough sleep, you're not going to feel well emotionally. I talk to my kids about this all the time. You didn't get a lot of sleep this weekend, so it's going to be harder to manage your emotions.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have to work a lot harder. So when we have chronic sleep deprivation, then life is harder. Just everything is harder. But when we have something physically going on, and people can relate to this, when you have a cold, you don't feel well emotionally. You don't feel like you're at your peak, right? I can't focus as well. I might be a little bit more sensitive to things. I might be kind of crabby. So when something is going on inside of our body, our energy is focused on whatever that is. And it can't be in the other places it needs to be when everything's functioning well.
Mm-hmm.
So that impacts our immune system. It impacts how we, like, cognitively, how we're thinking and responding to things, and it affects our emotions.
And when it affects our immune system, it seems like that's almost like a downhill effect, right? Because then if you don't, like you say, you don't feel good, then you physically don't feel good, then you mentally don't feel good. And then it's harder to get out of that hole.
Yes, absolutely. Because now you're just, where do you start?
And where do you start? So can you answer that for us?
Yeah. So where I start with people, so this is kind of like what I do with people. We have the therapy, we have functional medicine, and then we have both. And ideally I do both. Okay. Really, then we're working with the whole person. So let's just take a case where we're working with both here. What we would do is look at their blood work and find out what's going on. I just throw out percentages and I'm kind of just making them up, but a very high percentage of people, it's their gut. There's stuff going on in their gut. This is where everything is. 80% of our immune system is in our gut. I actually know that percentage. And when our gut's off, everything else is off. So we start there and we heal the gut, do some support, get rid of the bad stuff, put the good stuff back in. And then we move on to whatever else is messed up. A lot of times the thyroid is off. So we go there, and this is one of the things we rule out with depression. Is there a thyroid issue before we start treating depression? So we're getting the thyroid back in balance, the pituitary, thyroid, adrenals, that whole cascade, so that all those systems. And then we get into hormones. So we don't want to balance the hormones without taking care of the thyroid and the gut, because hormones are just going to go out of whack again if we don't take care of the root cause. So when we're doing all of that along with therapy, so if there's if there's a trauma that we need to work through, if there's chronic stress, if there's, situational, maybe there's a divorce, then we're doing that along with the supplement plan, healing inside and emotionally.
Feels like everything that's positive for us that we can do, you have to have money to do.
Yes, I
It's
know it's so
horrible.
frustrating. It is so horrible. I was just having this conversation with somebody because I was struggling with it so much. A lot of my clients that I see for therapy are on state assistance.
Mm,
They can't afford supplements. Insurance won't pay for it.
no.
So how do you help them? And what I do with most people is, we're going to just vitamin D. I mean, I'm in North Dakota, so we don't get a lot of sun. You guys get a lot in California,
Yeah.
but vitamin D deficiency is huge. So if we can do nothing else, let's get you on some vitamin D.
And
Uh,
do you feel like magnesium seems to be off a lot too?
yeah, yeah. I don't even know the statistics on that, but there's a lot of people are pretty deficient in magnesium, and that's a really great one for anxiety too.
Mhm.
Just
Yeah.
calm, sleep.
Yeah, it helps with sleep, right? Because like you said, if you don't get the sleep, and obviously everybody, you don't want to diagnose anybody on a podcast and stuff like that. But I was having this conversation actually with a friend yesterday, and we were talking about she doesn't sleep very well. And we were just talking about the fact that like, and nothing she takes can help her sleep either. She's tried all these different things, and all the medicines and everything now they don't work anymore.
Yeah.
And if you don't sleep, then you get more anxious, you get more upset, and then you can't sleep, and then your mind's always going, and it's this downhill, downhill. And so the two things that we talked about was her getting up. She got a prescription for like the high dose of vitamin D, and then her taking magnesium as just a starting point,
Mm-hmm.
just something, right? Because the idea is to give. Obviously, everybody has to go through their own thing, but if you don't have the money and you don't have the insurance and all of these different things, there are things that you can start with.
Yeah.
That at least give the body a stable place to begin.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because we could go on and on about the fact that like it's cheaper to buy a cheeseburger than an apple in most areas.
I know, it's insane. I just had that conversation with somebody earlier. That even talking to people about starting to eat a little bit more healthy, they're like, I can't afford it. How do I do
Mm-mm,
that?
mm-mm.
So it's small changes and different choices where they're able to do it, So we try to do the least intrusive on their financial life, getting outside more. You can get outside.
Right, that doesn't cost money.
Right. But we in North Dakota, it gets 40 below sometimes. So you can't do that. But
No.
it's really working with where are they at? What are they able to do that's
Mhm.
reasonable for their life? Not just like, oh, you have to take all these supplements. It's going to cost this amount of money. Figure it out.
Yeah.
It's like, what's reasonable for you? So I've had people where they're like, I just can't afford all of that right now. So we stretch it out. So it's less per month.
Mhm.
And the idea isn't to be on these forever.
Right.
Um, Really, when you're getting your body in balance, you shouldn't have to stay on something forever.
Yeah.
So for most people, it's a 6-month window, some for 12, but honestly, I haven't even had anybody that's needed to go 12 months. So if you can figure it out for 6 months, or even if we stretch it out to 12, so it's less per month, so we can get your body healing,
Right.
then you can really save money in the long run.
Right. And your mental health.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, that's priceless. Your physical health and your mental health, that's priceless, right?
Yeah.
And there's always something we can all give up. I love my coffee, and I know it's not good for me, and it costs money. So if I needed to give that up to afford a supplement, then that would be something I might want to consider. But there's
Right.
always something that we can give up.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Okay, so 2 more questions. Let's say one, do you see people like virtually?
Yes.
Okay. And then 2, let's say like somebody listened to this podcast and they're like, okay, I have a therapist. I live in a different area. I have a therapist already, but I'm really interested in the physical stuff. I have blood work that my doctor ordered. Is this something that I can like sign, like make an appointment to see and talk to you about, and then get an idea of what you see from that?
Yes, absolutely. So I have my website, www.pathtowardhealing.com.
Okay.
And they can go on there, and actually there's just like click here. You can put in your information, say I'm interested in setting up a consult, and then we'll email back and forth and kind of find the best time. I've had and then all of that is done virtually. People send me their blood work, whether that's through email, or I've had some people just send me screenshots. And then I would set up a Zoom meeting, and we'd go through and I explain, here's what your blood work is showing. This is what this means. And then here's the supplement plan. And this is why each one of these things are on your plan.
And would they then give you a list of what they're currently on? So you could say like, well, maybe you're too high here because you're actually taking this and you shouldn't be taking this.
Yeah. And I don't tell people to get off of things.
Right.
I'm not a medical doctor. Yeah. But I do talk to people about, is it working? If it's not working, maybe talk with your doctor about what you need to do to get off of it. Or if it's a supplement that you've been taking forever and it's not making any difference, maybe you just don't keep taking it. Maybe you try this and then see where you're at. If you feel like you need to go back to it, then go back to it. But I've had people that have stayed on everything and done the supplement plan and then afterwards decide to get off of it. Yeah. There are some that interact with medications. So I need to know what medications they're on. So there's one that I use a lot for like sleep and mood support. And if they're on an antidepressant, they can't take that one. Okay.
That's interesting. And I would imagine that the quality of the supplement is extremely important.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I use there's one that I primarily use. And then there's another one that I recently started using as a backup if this other one doesn't have that product in stock, but I know that they're both really good quality. They're very well used. And I've used them personally. So I know that they do work. I've experienced it. And then I haven't had a single client come back and be like, this didn't work for me. I don't know what.
Right. This is crap. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
What is your purpose in life? You're welcome.
I'm just going to throw this really big one in. I want people to have their own purpose. I want people to feel well and have a good life. And whether that is through mental health or whether that's through functional medicine, just that we don't have to stay in the place that we're in, that things can get better and we can do things and we have some control. It's not just, this is the hand I was given and I just need to deal with it. But that we can make changes in our life.
That they have power to live a better life, basically.
Yeah. Yep.
And if you had to leave our conversation with one thought, I'd love to give these at the very end, right? One thought for people out there listening. I think that your message was one great thought, but let's give them I don't know if you want to give them a tool that you have found that helps, or we all know, well, we don't all know, but through your message, we know that we do have some control in our mental and physical health. But give me a thought that you want to leave people with, whether it's how to talk to somebody or whatever it is that you feel like is something that comes up maybe a lot and that needs to be addressed, whatever you feel like you want to tell us.
Okay. I think I would say, because this comes up so much for me, stop looking at just the goal, but look at how far you've come.
Love that. Love that. Yeah. Because it can be very intimidating if all you ever continue to do is put a goal out there and never look back to see what you've done.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe you've come farther than you realized. Sometimes we got to look back to see that.
Absolutely. Love it. Thank you.
Yes.
Love talking to you. Of course. And give us your website one more time.
www.pathtowardhealing.com.
Pathtowardhealing.com. Path, no S, path toward healing.
No S, pathtowardhealing.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you for your time.
Yeah. Thank you so much. This is great. Mm-hmm.